I read maths at Clare because it was recommended that if you were interested in theoretical physics at Cambridge, maths was the thing to do rather than natural sciences. And I loved my time at Cambridge, but looking around at my fellow maths students, it was clear that I would never be outstanding in mathematics or theoretical physics. And when you've been just about the top student, certainly on the science side at your Northern Grammar School, that's an enormous sort of psychological blow. And I got interested in a smaller and smaller part of maths over my 3 years. Eventually, it was just sort of general topology, I think. So it was no surprise that I graduated with a third. If it had been a 4-year degree, I would probably have failed. And I had no plan B other than being a research scientist. There was nothing else I particularly wanted to do. So to put off difficult decisions, I did a PGCE, and I chose Leeds University as opposed to other universities because it had a Go club. I played the Japanese board game of Go. And once you've done a PGCE, the natural next step is to apply for a teaching job. So the first job I applied for, I got, which was at a comprehensive school in Oldham. I didn't intend to stay in teaching long term, and my fellow teachers said to me that if you don't want to stay long term, don't stay short term, because some of them who'd only been teaching for 3 years already felt trapped in teaching. They wanted out but couldn't really see a way out. And I had a stroke of luck. I read a book during the first half-term holiday about accountancy, got hooked on it, read the intermediate volume, the advanced volume. I was really interested in accountancy, but I still wasn't planning to train as an accountant because it meant 3 years more studying. I come from a very poor family, didn't want to put a burden on them. And it was my sister, who's 6 years younger than me, so she was about 16 at the time, said that Mum and Dad would be quite happy to support you as an accountancy student. So in the month of July, I decided to train as an accountant. And of course, all the big firms are full. So I had to apply to small firms because I didn't want to wait another year to join a big firm, and got into a small firm. At this small firm, doing incomplete record jobs, it was actually quite a good training for how to prepare accounts. In my Part 1 exams, I came 5th in the country, which is a big restorer of my sort of personal morale, which had taken a hit when I discovered I couldn't be good enough to be the kind of theoretical physicist that I wanted. As soon as I qualified as a chartered accountant, I left my small firm and joined Arthur Andersen as a tax specialist and remained a tax specialist for the rest of my career. I left Arthur Andersen after 6 years because I felt slightly frustrated, joined a small firm for 3 years, initially as a senior manager, then became a partner there, then realized I hated it. And I joined Price Waterhouse in 1987 as a senior manager. And 3 years later, in 1990, I became the second ethnic minority person and first Muslim to become a partner in Price Waterhouse in the UK. In 2003, I was elected onto the Price Waterhouse Coopers Supervisory Board, and I retired at the end of 2009. And the one thing I'd like to say about accounting, I mean, accountants have a reputation for being really boring people, and I'm more than happy to make jokes about boring accountants and so on, but I was never bored in my entire career, not even for one day. It was fascinating. I had a chance to solve really complicated problems, which people were willing to pay to solve. And the other part of it is when you're solving problems that are not complicated technically, but are incredibly important to real human beings. When you've got a brother and sister who basically not on talking terms because they've inherited a parent's company exactly 50-50, and he's frozen her out and given her nothing. She was my most satisfied ever client. I got £50,000 for her out of the company, which for her was a lot of money, paid over 10 years. But it also meant she could be personally no longer aggrieved that her brother was basically exploiting her. And I had lots and lots of real jobs like that for ordinary human beings, as well as doing really complicated things for multinational companies. I had lots of opportunity to travel, especially in my last few years when I became an Islamic finance specialist, went around all the world sort of giving presentations on Islamic finance. Retired at the end of 2009. I didn't want to retire to just to sort of watch television or do more gardening. So I remain incredibly busy on politics, interfaith relations, speaking to schools. I taught myself HTML in retirement, sort of constructed my own website, and I have a really fun time.
Thank you. And again, what would you recommend to young people, Amin?
First of all, life is too short to waste it doing something that you hate just because it pays well. It's a terrible choice to make. Some people do make that choice and they feel dissatisfied with themselves maybe a decade or so later. Instead, I think it's important to follow your heart and do something you really care about, but also remember that unless you come from a rich family, you have to earn enough money to pay the bills. I've always been a very, very practical person.